Hi guys, this is Jake at Canadian Cutting Edge, and we've got another Ganzo review for you today. We haven't had one in a little while. This is the Ganzo Firebird F753M1 in orange. This is the little brother of this knife, which is the G753. This knife was done just around the time when Ganzo was starting the Firebird name. You can see the Firebird logo there. And by the time they came out with this younger brother version, it's totally into the Firebird logo. And instead of saying by Ganzo, it says made by Ganzo, but it's a Firebird. And this guy is virtually identical. There's a couple differences. And the major one is the size. 3.5-inch blade here, 3-inch blade here. It looks like it's almost like half the size, you know? It's about half the weight. It's a little guy. 3-inch blade, 3.5-inch blade. And I think you're going to be interested in seeing the full review of this guy today. So stick around. So here we go. Filling up the screen here is the G753 by Ganzo as they started their Firebird line. And here is the little guy that we're looking at today, the F753M1. There's no 1 on the blade, but that's Ganzo's prerogative. They're calling it the F753M1 if you go to their website, ganzoknife.com, and you can check out their products there. There's a few subtle differences about this knife, and we're going to talk about that after we get past the preliminaries. So first off, if we take a look at these two knives, they are very much the same knife. You've got the same shape, you've got the same shape clip, it's just smaller. You got the same shape blade, just smaller. You've got both access locks. Ganzo calls these the G-lock. There's a slight difference here that I'd like to share with you. Even the thumb stud's smaller on the new knife, but you've got the anodized screws, which is the same, the blue anodization on them. And you've got another big difference, and we'll talk about that later, is this one's open pillar construction. This one's got a backspacer. So there's a number of little differences. Before we get into that, let's talk about the sizes and dimensions for everything that you see here. The blade, 440C steel by Ganzo. Nowadays, it's a budget steel, but it's just as good as it was when it was a premium steel, because it's actually probably better now than it was back then, because they have made some subtle changes to it. I won't get into the metallurgy because I'm not a metallurgist and I'll probably say something wrong. Drop point, very stabby. The knife is all belly. There's a curve going all the way along. There's no section that's totally flat. We've got a saber grind here. And the length of the cutting edge on this knife is 7.3 centimeters, which is 2.89 inches. The length of the blade, we're talking about from the very apex of this curve on the handle to the very tip of the blade. Guess what, guys? My vernier caliper says it is 2.998 inches. Very close. That's too close to call, I should say. That's 7.61 centimeters. I'm suspecting that if you've got a grumpy officer that pulls you over and wants to measure your knife, that thing's going to be 3 inches and you might get in trouble. I don't know. It all depends on the officers, how they are in your area. But Ganzo cut that thing very close to 3 inches. I think the average police officer, unless you're being a jerk, is going to say that's fine if you live in a jurisdiction that's a 3-inch limit. But I don't know. I don't live where you live. I live where I live, and we don't have a 3-inch limit where I live, thankfully. The thickness of the blade, 2.8 millimeters, which is 0.11 inches. The thickness of the steel behind the grind on this guy is 0.74 millimeters, which is 0.029 inches. That's a bit heavy for an EDC knife. That's on the robust kind of end of things, which surprises me. It's actually a bit heavier than this guy. This guy, if I remember correctly, was about 0.6 millimeters. So right behind that final grind, it's a bit thick, which means it's a little bit harder to cut through stuff, but the edge is pretty sharp, and it's good to go. I wish they would have made it a little bit thinner, but it is what it is, and you've got what you've got, and there you are. The handle length, 10.1 centimeters, which is 4 inches. The handle thickness, not counting the pocket clip, 1.1 centimeters, which is 0.45 inches. And the total length of this knife when it's open is 17.7 centimeters, which is right on 7 inches. 82 grams, 2.9 ounces. It's a decent 3-inch knife. It's actually that light because there's skeletonizing in here. Here you can see the skeletonizing on this knife. So we've got 3 main holes on the liners there. And you can also see how the access lock works. And when you pull back on the access lock, that's what makes the blade free to move back and forth. Really nice knife for the weight. 3 inches of cutting edge, under 3 ounces, and it feels good and it looks good. Really nice. Let's talk about the differences between these two knives, because chances are you might have a G753. So I talked about the similarities. The differences are, notice the change in the, I'll bring it nice and close to the screen right here. Hopefully it'll focus. Notice the differences on this G-lock, access lock. Ganzo calls it a G-lock. Nice and smooth roundedness on this new one. And the old one is just sort of those steps going up. The new one's got a little bit less. It's a bit smoother. It's totally adequate. I think they did it this way on the older one so that it would ensure grip with your thumb. But the way they did this new one is very, very good. I don't mind it at all. Another subtle difference is, instead of the very fancy pivot screws, it's just a regular screw. There is a Torx inside this one, but it's, that fancy with the 3 little notches in it. Just regular on the smaller one. So if you turn it over, you can see that same thing again. You can see the thumb studs are smaller. I really like the fact how they made this blade with that sharp wrist choil. Really, really good. Another difference that I mentioned earlier on is we've got a back spacer here and we've got open pillar construction here. I like the open pillar construction better. And that is the extent of the differences on this knife. Everything else is the same, the only other difference being the size. So let's put that away. What do we got? Well, we've got a pocket clip that is tip up, and you can have right or left. Let's see what it looks like in the pocket. Slides into the pocket like that. And you've got just over a centimeter, close to half an inch, not quite, of knife sticking out. And if it's this orange one, it's fairly visible. If you're wearing blue jeans and you have the black one, it's not quite as visible. The OD green isn't all that visible either. But you can really see it on here how visible the knife is in the pocket. It's not terrible. It's pretty good. I like it. And the pocket clip has got that great retention that the Ganzo pocket clips have always had, even though it's just made a little bit smaller. The jimping on this knife, we've got jimping on the thumb end on the handle and on the opposite side on the handle here, which means it actually does add a grippiness to it in, just whatever kind of grip that you want to hold this knife in. That little bit of jimping helps give you a nice, good purchase on this handle. I really like it a lot. This knife looks very small in my hand, and that's because my hands are a large size, right on the borderline between large and extra large in North American dimensions. That's between 9 and 10 European dimensions. And any grip you want to hold this knife in, it's comfortable. Really good that way. The access lock, it locks up rock solid. I've listed in other videos why I don't do a spine whack test anymore. Very solid, no problem at all. I've done some spine whack tests even on this one. I just don't do them on the videos. It's a waste of time. We've got open pillar construction, and you can see those pillars right there, how they're that nice 3D hourglass kind of shape. Looks great. The liners are very smooth. There's no sharp edges. The fit and finish is done very, very well. I really like this little touch here of these 6 little cutouts right there. It's just a tiny little thing, and it doesn't really add anything to the purchase. It just adds to the look of it a little bit. The lanyard hole, you can fit 550 paracord through there, no problem at all, and it works quite well. I've already talked about the sharpener's choil that I like. I like this initial choil here. Very good purchase on this knife. I've used it under hard use, and I've done some stabbing into soft wood, and my hand does not slip forward at all. No danger of that. I haven't stabbed super hard, but I did, some stabbing into some soft wood just to see how it would work, and it's fine. Let me show you, if I can, that you can use the axis lock to deploy the blade without using the thumb studs. There you go. And I can't always get it to close. There we go. And so that's a nice little gimmick for playing with this knife that works quite well. The thumb studs are, I don't know, they're just a little bit, they feel that they're a little bit too close to the handle. It's sometimes a little tricky for me to get my thumb on them. And sometimes I just slide over and I don't deploy the blade because, there's just not quite enough space here for me. Not a big deal. That's a really tiny thing. I just need to mention everything that I come across. The swedge on this blade here helps make it look really cool. I like that a lot. It's a very strong tipped knife, even though it looks like it might be weak, but it's actually quite good. I like the whole fit and finish. Everything else about this knife is just done very, very well. I don't think there's anything else. Oh, the pivot. Inside the pivot, we've got 1 phosphor bronze washer and 1 white nylon washer, and they work quite well. You saw me doing the old flick test already. Lockup is solid. There's no blade play up and down, back and forth. Alignment is very good when the knife is closed. It's a great knife. Let's do some cut tests. Here we have some paper that's a little bit heavier. Not bad at all in the cutting that it's doing. I forgot to do the cut test when it was brand new. Sorry, guys. So I've used it for a while, and it's still performing quite well. Let's try the G10. I keep calling it G10. I don't know why. Let's test the paracord. There's a couple layers of paracord. And it took a bit to get through there. That's a test which really demonstrates this thickness behind the grind coming into play. It was a little harder to cut through that with just a push cut instead of a sliding cut. A sliding cut works really well. That's no problem at all. That's what I'm demonstrating right here. But that push cut that I did when I was just sort of pushing through with that way, the thickness behind the grind hinders that functionality. This is a 9-strand 550 paracord. It's the heaviest 550 paracord that you can get, and it did an okay job with that. So, what do you think of this knife? Are you glad that there finally are some more 3-inch knives by Ganzo? I don't live in a jurisdiction where I need it, but I know a lot of people have been asking Ganzo to make some 3-inch knives or slightly smaller, and this is one of those, and this one's done very, very well. So thank you so much for Thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. Remember, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.